Hello, everyone, and welcome to your horoscope for the week of May the 6th till 12th, 2024. We have quite an active sky at play, but this comes as no surprise because the conjunction, just the recent conjunction of Uranus and Jupiter, one of the celestial conversations which is easily the highlight of the year, even though it already took place, it already perfected. On one hand, these planets are still conjunct, not very tightly, but their conjunction is still operational. And on the other hand, even though maybe the strength of the conjunction, because it took place at around the 21st of April, 2024. So maybe the exact moment of the conjunction didn't play out in a very strongly physical way on the external reality, so to speak, but it definitely played out in a very principalistic way, in a rather powerful manifestation, I would say. For example, the spark of the student protests everywhere basically on the planet. When students are protesting, that's almost like, before a storm, at least in this part of the world, in Europe where I live, certain insects be, behave in a certain way. For example, like winged ants start swarming, but in other places, other type of insects start swarming. So regardless of what your phone says or your weather forecast, when you see that play out, you know that the storm is minutes or maybe hours away. Student protests are exactly like that. You just know out of life experience, out of simply looking at history play out, when that happens, revolution or a massive change is just around the corner. So that was deeply, deeply symbolic in so very many ways. And also the Sabian symbol. Now, I'm so sorry, I cannot remember exactly which degree of Taurus it was, but it went something like a dove, a white dove, flying over turbulent waters. There was either a big lunation taking place around that Sabian symbol degree, or it might have been the conjunction of Uranus and Jupiter even. I'm so sorry, but this just came to me. That Sabian symbol represented look at the signs because nature is giving signs before something major happens. The student protest is exactly the sign that change, revolution, and this doesn't have to be violent at all, just a powerful upgrade or a quantum leap in consciousness, in principles, in worldview, in philosophy of our species, basically, is just around the corner. But of course, where I'm going with this is the conjunction's power is still very much playing out, operational, so it doesn't even need to reverberate because we're still in the eye of the storm, so to speak. So all we need to do is look at the world, or just sometimes even just look outside the window, and we can see that playing out. Very powerful earth events, a lot of turbulent and unusual activity at sea, flooding, but that's partially due to Neptune anaretic in Pisces, the waters, the power of the sea. And many times, anaretic Neptune, the sea is harsh, the sea is ruthless, the sea has a will of her own. So we see that also play out on the world stage, but in this plays out in so very many different ways. Someone told me that they expected a much greater scale economic instability or high and low and stuff like that, the change part. And all I can say it is that don't get disappointed yet, because on one hand, keep in mind that many specialists can predict these lows and they can counter it with certain measures. So we must not disregard the efforts that have been placed into making this as stable as possible, because this conjunction trines the conjunction point of Saturn meeting Pluto in January 2020, a very powerful moment of the biggest, perhaps, astrological moment of our lifetimes. So that gives Pluto power and knowledge, Saturn, because, so of course, the efforts to stabilize it cannot be disregarded. And that's in a way also Uranus. It gave us the knowledge already, the technology perhaps. But when our inner values transform, it's just a question of time when everything value related, so even economics, transform. So basically, where I'm going with this week, besides being a very active week from different perspectives, it's still very much about the Uranus and Jupiter conjunction playing out, especially that Jupiter touches a key point this week. Mercury retrograde is also making Mercury is also making very powerful and key moves, finishing his retrograde themes, because it's going through its shadow path and almost leaving it. We're almost done with the Mercury retrograde wrap up in a real sense. So Mercury is going direct all throughout the week, but it's going through certain points which it marked during this retrograde moment. So going back over those points once again, now that it's direct, highlights them and tries to give a certain kind of closure or the effect it needs to produce. The moon also makes very powerful moves because it is traversing all through the week in this part of the sky where most of the planets are packed. So as it exits Aries, it enters Taurus, where it meets Venus, Sun, Uranus, and Jupiter. So the Sun's conjunctions, especially at the beginning of the week, are very relevant. And this also represents that either on the 7th or the 8th, depending on where you are on the planet, it's the new moon taking place in Taurus at around 18 degrees. And this is quite an energetic, revolutionary even new moon, but where we might get the more positive side of it, because on one hand, it sextiles Saturn, and Saturn gives it stability. Saturn grounds this energy, and it needs the grounding because it is very close to Uranus. It is conjunct, not by the degree orb, but it is conjunct. So that gives it a lot of instability. And Uranus, on the other hand, receives an expansion from Jupiter. So it's a very powerful Uranus, making the new moon very powerful, especially that it's a super new moon, meaning that the moon is physically that much closer to the Earth. So its impact on our Taurus values, physical body, five senses, finances, because translate Venus into everything that she is susceptible of in Taurus. So this can even be a financial energy. But remember the sextile with Saturn, it's stabilizing. So I do believe it's actually quite positive, and it comes as a saving grace. Uranus brings the upgrade, which might seem a bit forced, or we are kicked out of our comfort zones. But remember, sextile to Saturn, Saturn makes sure that we can cope, we can manage, and we see the utility, we see the value of it. We see how this can be something very positive, grounding for the future, which can be a day after or 6 months, depending on our specific configuration. The other thing is Venus is in her home sign of Taurus. So the Venusian themes are deeply highlighted and they need to be embodied. So this also gives a sense of urgency. And the moon conjuncting all of this, well, we feel it that much deeper. We feel its urgency that much strongly, especially that at the very beginning of the week, the moon is conjunct Chiron and then Aries. Aries, the revolution, the rebellion, the sovereignty. Our voices must be heard, need of self expression, and that to be taken into consideration. So you can imagine it's going to be quite a heated beginning of the week. And Chiron, the wounding, as Chiron is approaching Aries, the good side of this is that healing many times is a necessity, and sometimes life makes it so that is the most important thing in our lives, because there can be so many other things to distract us, but the conjunction with Aries somehow makes us feel, because this is Aries instinctual energy, that us being, I don't necessarily want to say healed, but operational, as in to integrate the wound, to understand its lesson, or to do something with it, or to heal it, close it, etc., is a must for our well-being. And on the other hand, moon conjunct and Aries, this is where uh, all the rebellious feelings, everything that wounded us, everything that is preventing our healing, our comfort, us getting where we need to be. So everything that we perceive as a limitation or as an aggressor, we get into a position state, if you know what I mean. We show our teeth emotionally because this is the moon. So collectively speaking, the wars, the Middle East tension, the protests of various kinds, not just the obvious ones, but there are so many protests. People are deeply unhappy, and this is what, and politicians are being aggressed, sometimes totally innocently. That's a symbol of Pluto going retrograde on one hand and entering back into Capricorn. Not yet. It's not even moving all that much this week yet, but it's retrograde, it's stationary, shadowy, barely moving, very powerful. Aquarius, the people, the collective aggression, inner aggression, their frustration, their rage, well, it's directed to the ones who push the buttons ultimately. So, of course, we see this play out on the world stage. But let us begin. And another thing, Mars is also in his home sign of Aries. So you can imagine everything Martian is very ready and very much present. Now, of course, every astrological energy has certain octaves, has certain ways of manifestation, different polarities. But in the present context, we can imagine that Mars in Aries just makes everything that is in the present that much more intense, including the conflict. So we cannot ignore that. So, but the good side to this, the North Node in Aries, well, after the war, did what it was supposed to do, and understand this in what in whichever way you wish, politically, in a very earthly way, philosophically, spiritually, divinely, religiously. So everything needs an ending once. So this can be a fight for peace, fight for resolution, fight for solving the problem. So that's also very much Mars. and very much Mars in Aries, because it is still the fight, the warrior, for peace, for love, for compassion, for legal fights. Jupiter very much in the picture. So that's very, very relevant. And last but not least, the energetic Neptune. The sea, physically, we see it in the waters, floods, devastating floods, the power of water, but also the spirit, the mystery, and all sides of the spirit, both the sacred and both the opposite of it, are very much active right now. We just feel this in the air, that the spirit is so very present, and it kind of animates us. For example, it animates certain religious leaders in a strongly passionate and also Piscean way, up to the degree of delusion. But it's passionate, it's intense, it's sheer power of belief. That's also Neptune. But at the same time, it's also where the spirit just works. Not necessarily even through people, on its own accord. So this is a very mysterious couple of months, that because Neptune will hang out at this degree. It will retrograde and then return. So this is just the beginning. We will feel the spirit very, very, very strongly, and all expressions of it. We see the spirit of war very much active, you know. For example, if the spirit of war would need a depiction, like a Virgo type of label, let's say Baal, we see that play out so very obviously. But let's get to the horoscope. So at the beginning of the week, we can see where the planets are positioned. So the energetic Neptune. Then we have Saturn at the 17th degree of Pisces, holding a sextile with the Sun, starting the perfection of the sextile. This is so beautiful because this is grounding. This is embodying our beliefs, embodying our principles. Our sacrifice is worth it. And this is a really, like positive karmic energy as well, because whatever karma pulls us towards to resolve, very personally speaking, for example, a lot of things to do with earth, as in inheritance, land, agriculture, and these issues are resolved within families, and Jupiter in the sign of Taurus, even legally. But doing this, following it through, leads to a permanent closure, a big karmic relief, so to speak. So regardless of how this plays out, it's worth to follow, to be strong in that sense. Venus and Taurus at home, the moon conjunct here between Aries and Chiron, Mercury conjunct Chiron. So for the third and final time in the Mercury retrograde context, so we are understanding where our wounds are, why it wounds us, why it matters, why we're vulnerable there. We're integrating. And for a lot of people who suffered, like, for example, medical interventions or a bit of a breakdown, physically speaking, under Mercury retrograde, for those people, it is very relevant for the recovery, healing, maybe the final steps towards recovery, and also the lessons learned. So very important, this Mercury and Chiron conjunction, and also very important steps in the medical world, important communication, important evolution of situations. So everything healing related here. And of course, perhaps the most important part. And the thing is, I have to say certain words which are like almost banned in the present moment. But let me just say the keyword genocide. That's like a wound, isn't it? And that wound is inflicted it can only be inflicted in an Aries fashion. you can see how that same wound is looked through in so very many ways, through so very many different lenses. Is the wound repeating itself? And is the wounded wounding, giving the wound, passing it over to another? Is this how it enacts itself? And I am just asking certain philosophical questions. Or is this needed for healing? Is this the mirror? Does this show the whole human collective how very fresh certain generational wounds still are? The fact that they aren't closed at all. They're merely just began to scar, but the wound was opened. So this Mercury Chiron conjunction even speaks to us in a very big social, political, and historic, and philosophical, and even spiritual way about the wound and how truly fragile we are in spirit, even. And let everyone to interpret this as they wish. So it is very, very relevant and important. And the moon activating all of this, well, it sinks in that much deeply, emotionally, and even collectively speaking. Another energy very active at the beginning of the week is Mars, still holding a sextile with Pluto, Pluto retro, still standing still technically, retrograde. So very powerful Mars, because Pluto in Aquarius, the power of the people, power of the masses, but this also means clashes. And we saw and are seeing this play out in the world stage, but that also means explosions, technology. Russia is revealing technology, unexpectedly efficient or new technology, that war, Mars and Aries. And Pluto, the big power players, technology and booms, bombs, explosions of any kind. So, and another thing, space travel. Space missions are resuming in the sense that their collective interest in them is growing and growing. More and more nations are taking part of space exploration and missions and travel and scientific stuff. So again, Pluto in Aquarius, where is the boundary? Pluto is no longer the boundary. Is Sedna the boundary? Not even Sedna. So this is where, as astronomy is changing, astrology is changing. Pluto is no longer alone the big power player, the powerhouse. It doesn't mean that its power waned. There are just other Pluto type, how should I say, influences, powers, but this is where Pluto, out of all of them, is in our collective consciousness, by now, astrologically speaking, quite deeply rooted. Most astrologers in the world use Pluto, or even those who do not use it for certain technical reasons are very much aware of it and have their own respects to it. But the other power players, Pluto-like powers, objects, influences, trans-Neptunian objects, most of them, are not very present in our collective consciousness. They're present in a very childlike state, as in we don't use them yet. We are not studying yet in a very technical way. We are channeling them, absolutely. They speak to us, but through channelers, mostly. Let me give you an example. Sedna in the sign of Gemini, freshly entered there from her retrograde, the second time. That is so important and so influential. it in a way upgrades our education system. Everything that has to do with education and learning, not just in a very, how should I say, modern way, but even the most rudimentary instinctual way, where a mother teaches her child to walk, for to anything that has to do with learning is gonna go through a powerful transformation, but where everything that is hindering us, everything that is going against the most natural and efficient form of learning is going to be highlighted by Sedna in the next 60 plus years. Because Sedna is staying in Gemini till 2060 something, if I'm not mistaken. So there is a lot that we are going to be learning from Sedna, especially of our own um, mental and intellectual configuration. Everything that we need to um, shed off from an evolutionary perspective. Ways of learning that are by now primitive for us. But remember, Sedna is hell bent for everything to be as natural as possible. Sedna doesn't like artificial, so she will return us to the roots of what it means to learn. So certain situations will exist in our collective consciousness which force us to learn and adapt in a Gemini fashion. We will experience two extremes playing out at the same time so we can find a middle way. And also, Sedna is very much about sacrifice. We will need to save our youth from. Now, I don't want to sound very negative, like a negative person, but our youth are going to be challenged in a big way by mental imbalances due to the age of Aquarius, Pluto in Aquarius, not because the planets are doing that. The planets are just showing us the effects of internet and the unhealthy ways that it rules our collective consciousness. So the primary victims of this was the opposite of Aquarius, Leo, youth. So that means all of us are gonna be called upon by the Sedna to do everything in our power to help them. What is the solution? Well, whenever Sedna enters a sign, she also attempts to integrate the most incompatible expression of energies into that sign. The rebellious nature of Sedna. It makes a whole sign, like a whole part of the sky, experience something that usually it would never. Um, so what does that mean? Love. But Gemini is a mental energy. How can one charge one's thoughts, communication, and everything that they share with another with love in such a way that it's felt? Well, in an esoteric way. Because in esoteric astrology, the ruler of Gemini is Venus. And tarot, Gemini is the lover's card. So this is where it evokes the most divine role of Gemini, which is to be a partner to whatever the divine wants it to be a partner to. The role of the brother, the sibling, or the partner, the divine basically essence of Gemini, if you know, as an archetype, not in any other way. So also the glyph of Gemini, it looks like a gate, because Gemini is how something divine is adapted to an usable earthly way, and how it enters, but then it's refined further by Cancer, Leo. As the energy goes through the zodiac, every sign refines it, but it is Gemini, the mind, which is the gateway, which welcomes the divine energy as a thought, inspiration, or whatever. So it is very, very important for us to be aware that there are many invisible still forces playing out astrologically speaking. So Pluto is still the big dog, so to speak, but is not alone. It's just part of a larger group, which is getting larger and larger with every passing year because they discover yet another trans-Neptunian object. So, and another thing at the beginning of the week is that Saturn and Pluto hold a semi-square. So this is a deeply frustrating energy because something limits our progress. Something limits us from living our future now. What is the blockage that annoys us, that irritates us? This must not become an obsession. We must somehow have trust Saturn in divine timing, even if Pluto, Aquarius, the times, the collective, and everything modern and Aquarius in our lives is so tumultuous that we, even if we are actually not, have this sensation of being left out, of being, way uh, behind with everything. We don't know enough. We must not allow this to turn into an inner rage, but rather to use this as a motivation. It doesn't matter, I still have faith. This is the best way to do something with that square. Then on the 7th or 8th, depending on where you are on the planet, and I'm gonna put this to the 8th because that's when it takes place in my country, my geographic location, the new moon in Taurus. So it will be at 18 degrees of the sign of Taurus. I have a special video with this. Check it out if you're interested. So I'm not going to go into details, but the sextile with Saturn makes it so productive, so stabilizing, so useful. Saturn implies the dream after it is distilled, after it gets a shape and form which is possible. Saturn, after it, from a total illusion and impossibility, it becomes an authentic dream which can be somehow enacted. That's when the sextile is very powerful for any kind of manifestation. This is really good financially speaking. This is even good for love and partnerships. Why not? Because many times the key to attract someone is inner values, a right balance of inner values. And Venus's also presence here gives that. So this new movement is sandwiched between Venus and Uranus. So I really, really like this energy because it is super helpful, creatively speaking, uh, financially speaking, for us to work something out, Saturn work, or to figure something out using our intelligence, Uranus, or using something very new, revolutionary, or specific to us, but we don't feel comfortable using. So it gets us out of our comfort zones, and a lot of good can happen, truly. And at the time of this new moon around, Mercury holds a semi-sextile with Uranus, and these planets are each other's octaves, Uranus being the higher octave. Now, this is a rather uncomfortable energy because you see Mercury retrograde in the sign of Aries. Sorry, Mercury direct. Mercury is direct, but going through its shadow path. Finishing up Mercury retrograde's themes that were marked in the sign of Aries. So the semi-sextile Either some things are way too fast for us, Uranus, or something within ourselves wants to jump ahead. It cannot wait. This is a very powerful restlessness energy and rebellious energy. So this is where like fights, Mercury and Aries, verbal battles for money, finances, story and stuff can occur. So there is going to be a lot of arguments in partnerships and in within colleagues, team members. There is going to be a lot of debate under this energy. Then if we go towards the ninth, this is when Jupiter reaches 26 degree of the sign of Taurus. Now this is important because it starts its conjunction with a fixed star named Algol. Now this is quite a notorious fixed star because it is considered one of the more malevolent celestial objects, where its frequency, its vibration causes a lot of disruption. I don't want to necessarily use the word evil or demonic or anything like that, but it comes across many times like that. And Algol is basically the head of Medusa. So it can be cruelty due to pride, arrogance, usually abuse, tyranny, the head of something not so nice. And many times the heads of state, heads, tyrants, dictators, the heads of, dot, 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 fill in whatever you want, a big dog. So Jupiter expanding it, well, on one hand, we may see their gestures as something exaggerated. So they might attempt to do something, again, gesture wise. That doesn't mean that they will actually play it out or enact it in an intention. Like Taurus is just a value that you want to change, etc., etc. And Jupiter, like a law or something to do with international affairs, something like that. Well, it will come through as exaggerated. Now, if we look at Jupiter as the planet of justice, maybe an international court of justice will have a ruling where a head of a certain big corporation or EU or whatever country, anything, mayor, it can be anything, is condemned for something. So Algol, when activated, yes, it does empower the more dishonest individuals to be show their dominance and power. Absolutely, because basically that is what we would call evil. But at the same time, many times, even a malevolent, an unfortunate, or a bad energy can play out in an opposite way. Why? Well, where there's a saying, especially in Christianity, that the divine uses even demons and evil to do good because everything is under the command of the divine. Heads many times fall. The heads of the most corrupt or most tyrant or whatever usually fall when Algol is triggered big time. But again, at the same time, Jupiter expands. So there might be a law or a legislation or something or breaking a law that is seen as something extreme, exaggerated, and but anyway, this is only the first part of this energy. Soon Saturn will conjunct it. Sorry, not Saturn. Uranus, sorry, Uranus. And If I'm not mistaken, Uranus will hang around near Algol when it goes retrograde. So Algol is going to be very much triggered. But before Uranus even gets there, the sun will shine a light upon whatever this Jupiter Algol conjunction was. And then Venus, financially or feeling wise, value wise, principle embodied in an earthly way, Taurus, show us again whatever this was supposed to mean. So it's gonna be interesting. So everything that is governed by Taurus and Jupiter, let us look with close attention to detail. So legislation, laws, aviation perhaps, or long distance travel, because Jupiter is the ruler of Sagittarius, religion, philosophy, university, higher education, higher knowledge, uh, and even anything that comes from space. Sagittarius is the host of the galactic center after all. So all of that will show what this Jupiter Algol conjunction may represent, financially speaking, in banks, institutions. In tarot, the high priest is Taurus. So Taurus has a very official side to it as well. Now, and something is legally binding and it's forever in your life, well, that kind of also shows up in either Taurus or second house. You know what I mean? In a certain way. So yeah. And at the same time, Ceres is somewhere around here, squaring Chiron. So that's how should I say? Ceres is grain, agriculture, nurture, food. In Capricorn, the power to feed. You know what I mean? Whose responsibility is it to feed? And Chiron, the lack of food is causing severe. So yeah, we will see this highlighted on the world stage. Now, if you move on to the 11, Mercury is conjunct Aries. This is also part of the larger Mercury retrograde because this is the third and final time when Mercury holds this conjunction. Again, rebellious energy. Mercury, communication, words, social media, any kind of media, protest, Aries, students. Well, anything that has to do with learning, schools, institutions like that. Well, either totally or partially, Mercury has something to do with them. So yes, there is going to be something unfolding. Hopefully, this is like a resolution, a completion, an agreement, or something positive. But with Aries, it can always still be heated. Yeah, so there is that. Then the sun is getting closer and closer to Uranus. Well, that conjunction is a surprising, shocking, electrifying energy. And the sun, it is the light of our consciousness. And again, Jupiter expands this conjunction. So this can be very beautiful. This can be delightful. This can be a pleasant surprise, delighting our senses, delighting us maximally. It can be, why not? Venus is in the sign of Taurus, also adding power to this. And soon she will sextile Saturn after, not this week, but after. So this can be, why not, romantic, financial. This is a positive energy to me. Surprises can go in a positive manner at this time, let's say, even romantic surprises or whatever. However, if you look at it from a very non-personal perspective, this may represent a big flare-up in solar activity. This may represent a heat, because the sun is also combustive. It combusts this Uranus. So the element of fire, electricity, earth events, etc., etc., etc. And Jupiter is starting to expand through a sextile and erratic Neptune, waters. But we must keep in mind that Jupiter is the ancient ruler of Pisces. So both of these planets are going to agitate waters. So what happens with the element of water? Seas, rivers, floods. But at the same time, Taurus value. This will give way to big archaeological discoveries or paleontological discoveries, because an erratic Neptune in Pisces reveals the past. You know, it will not pull off the whale, but it will maybe briefly make the whale so thin that we have a clear image of what's beyond. Or when Neptune is like the permanent fog of the ether, nothing is clear. Nothing can ever be clear. But what if for a fraction of a second, the fog disperses and Neptune gives us a glance? This reminds me of the movie Mists of Avalon, where Avalon was an island and you had to traverse through a lake with a boat to get there, but it was covered by totally impenetrable mists, fog. And the mist only allowed the priestesses in. In front of the priestesses, it dispersed and it revealed the beauty of Avalon, blah, blah. This is how it symbolically, of course, can play out. Now let's move to the 12th, where Venus holds a semi-square with Neptune. What's true and what's not, especially financially speaking, or physically speaking, or does he love me or not? Because this semi-square, Neptune comes with ideal. Neptune comes with all the green flags. Venus comes with all the red flags, or vice versa, depending on where the optimism comes from. Like, let me give you an example. Someone has a marriage, but it's not all that passionate and physically rewarding, as in five senses, but materially it's very rewarding. So this person might have an inner dialogue. What do I do? What is more worth it for me? My comfortable life, and I am treated like a queen or king. I am, so I can't say anything. I can't even complain. But my heart would so like a love story or a passionate whatever, even if this means risking everything. That person has to think think or feel. That doesn't mean there's a resolution, but you get, but put this into context. Financially speaking, like for example, my country's finances, what they tell me before elections, I know with my Venus, because I actually have Venus in the sign of Taurus and even second house natally, my Venus knows that every word or number is a lie, or every election promise is a lie. But my Neptune might think, well, maybe it can be a bit better, give it a chance. Don't be disappointed before it actually happens. So this is the type of energy where chances are the truth is in the middle, because when politicians usually promise something, they do have to deliver at least something, but Venus in Taurus, it will always disappoint. In the expectations will always be let down. So, put this into context. In love, in romance, in money, the job, well, you love it. But the money is so little that what are you gonna, how should I say, cut down all the good stuff from your life for the sake of loving it, loving your job, being in love with your job? Or, but it can be the opposite. It's so boring, Neptune, an erratic Neptune. You're like drowned. Nothing ever happens. But the money is so good that you just can't say no to it. There you go. Another expression of this energy. But if this wasn't enough, another semi-square between Mars and Uranus, this also irritates us. Because Uranus, the upgrade, my authenticity in value, in self-worth, in whatever. But then Mars in Aries, why aren't I there yet? Especially that Mars will very soon activate the North Node, energize it. So the need to be there, or at least to know when I'm getting there or how, is important. So this is a frustrating energy because Uranus, I have it figured out. I have the vision in my head, the feeling. I know what I need to do. Why aren't I there yet? Am I not living it yet? Why isn't my fight, Mars in the sign of Aries symbolically, full of victory yet? And then we must not forget Sun Uranus conjunction. Not perfect by the degree yet. It will be perfected a day after. That also the positive surprise and delight and all of that. Yes, absolutely. And risk paying off big time. But we must not forget that both of these planets are still, and I'm speaking about Sun and Uranus, very close still to the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. Both Jupiter, planet of luck, a planet of blessing. For some people, this is lottery win big time, or ridiculously beneficial, as in that's even a ridiculous word, sorry. Ridiculously too good to be true, financial or value gain. Now, the lottery win might be the most typical and classic example, but this can represent anything that's value, like a job, which simply is good to be true, but it's there. You both love it and it also pays, and every second going there is fun. For some people, I'm pretty sure it can be like that. Or my the five senses, especially, ladies usually dream the perfect man, both handsome but both a bit naughty, but the impossible combination, that which is by nature. Almost some things are dichotomous, so how can nature even build a man like that? But a lucky lady gets that after years of solitude. The man of her dreams is there. Or some people were anonymous, unrecognized artists for all of their life. Something happens, Uranus and Sun, the light, the spotlight is on them. They are catapulted to recover all those years in a second. So this can be a surprising shock, but there's the negative side to this. And I'm not speaking about its consequences in the sense of manifestation, but physically speaking, this means spikes in the Schumann resonance, which means nervousness, restlessness, anxiety for no reason, sleeplessness. Physically, our bodies are not right in the head. So this causes physical imbalances. So if you have strange symptoms which don't even make any sense, chances are it's this. And especially for people who have usually ADHD, or their minds are very, very active, hyperactive. For other people, it's not necessarily the mind, but more like the fantasy. And erratic Neptune. This period is going to be very intense, so prepare yourselves. But regardless, let us focus on the positive influences, because I am very sure that there is also a lot of positivity, that both the aneretic Neptune and also the Sun conjunct Uranus, the surprise, surprise, and the Sun, after it leaves Uranus, well, it's going to conjunct Jupiter. So that's, again, another moment. But still, I do believe that this conjunction with Uranus is a bit more relevant and powerful because it's very close to the conjunction point, and Venus will very soon activate it. The delight. So this can, long story short, this can truly play out as a really positive surprise for many people and even collectively. So thank you so much for listening. I hope that this was useful. I know that there is going to be a lot of frustration, inner conflicts, confusion, but clarity as well. The annoying type of clarity where I know the situation, and no matter what I do, I still have to know it in the real way. I can't bypass it. I can't paint it to something else. I can't lie to myself. These, even though these situations are going to be there is the quantum leap that we really have to focus on, and the power to manifest our faith. Saturn in Pisces sextiling new moon. Let us manifest Pisces peace, compassion, and anything that can truly represent the greater good of everyone. Pisces, the spirit of communion. All of us are truly one in spirit, and we can even be in emotion and heart and mind. So we must manifest. This is our duty. Saturn and Pisces, every soul's duty to try and manifest peace and growth, and a stop to all the violence, basically. So thank you, everyone. Wishing you a wonderful week until, and also a very happy Easter to those who celebrated today. Until next time, bye for now.